Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast, for his number is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The Bible warns us against the number of the beast, this mystical number 666. So much has been said and written about the meaning of this number. Is it possible that we can really understand what the Bible is referring to? In this presentation, we shall look at the history of this number and the real application of it today. Since the creation of the world, mankind has looked at the night sky in wonder. Instead of seeing it as part of God's creation, mankind came to view the sun as the life-giver, and it was worshipped as such. In ancient Babylon, the first great world-conquering empire, the worship of the sun became refined into the astrological religion that has survived throughout the ages. The course of the sun was plotted through the sky and divided into 12 houses to delineate the different positions of the sun through the year. Each house was in turn divided into 3 rooms, each with a god designated to rule over it. Each god was given a number from 1 to 36. And the sum total of the numbers 1 to 36 were added to give the mystical number of the chief god, 666. This god was a god that ruled by fear, and men carried amulets to assuage its anger. Certain symbols were carried by its followers to prevent harm. The 666 amulets, containing the mystical number of all the gods, were carried as charms to keep away any harm by showing the owner's allegiance to the astrological god. When ancient man viewed the sun through half-closed eyes, he saw the figure of a cross, and this became one of the first symbols of the sun god. This god was depicted as a cross in Babylon and in Egypt. The cross was also worn as decoration and as a talisman. Within Hinduism, which is a direct descendant of the Babylonian religion, we also find the cross being used in the worship of false gods. Thunder was a sign of the anger of the sun god, and lightning was its weapon. By its association with the 666 god, the lightning bolt was given the mystical value of 6, and the arrow and the nail also had this number, as they were also used to symbolize lightning and were carried as amulets. This religion and its symbolism pervaded all the ancient empires, including Greece, as shown here, and Rome, as we see here. Similarly, in Hinduism, the lightning bolt remains within its symbolism. The gods took on both male and female forms with interchangeable roles, which describe the various attributes of the one god that lay hidden behind the masks, Satan. The ancient people believed that when their priest kings died, they inhabited the stars and planets. So all the heavenly bodies were worshipped, and different times of the year were dedicated to the constellations. And the days to the planets and/or gods. Because of the way that the sun serpentined its way through the constellations, the snake also came to represent the sun god, as shown in this Islamic Sufic chart. He is often displayed on pagan temples. Many times guarding the entrance, as on this Egyptian temple, this Greek one, and this Roman one. The snake is found on Chinese temples. On Hindu temples, and within the Buddhism of Thailand. At a sun worship temple in Mexico, here we can see serpents guarding the entrance. They are found guarding the priest kings. Or the dead. Within all the false religions of the world, the snake takes the position as representative of the chief god. He was also represented as the promised branch, the Messiah, and was worshipped both in the form of a snake and a man, or sometimes as both. Since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, Satan, represented by the snake, has attempted to establish his own theocratic empire on the earth. Working through false religions and whichever temporal power would come under his sway, the symbols of his rule remained the same. Nimrod was the first recorded priest-king. He was known as a mighty hunter before the Lord, or as the Hebrew says, against the Lord. He was accredited, according to tradition, as being the first to mount upon a horse to hunt, and also with subduing the wild animals that roamed the countryside at that time. He was responsible for the construction of the Tower of Babel, which was actually an astronomical observatory with each level dedicated to one of the planets. In the Egyptian religion, this became the pyramid, sometimes made of steps, and other times as a 60-degree equilateral triangle, which also contained the mystical 666 number. When Nimrod died, according to tradition at the hands of his uncle Shem, his wife, Semiramis, claimed that he had gone to live in the sun and become the sun god. This not only reinforced the idea of the sun as the dwelling place of the most powerful of the expanding pantheon of gods, but also introduced the hidden all-seeing god. Represented by the all-seeing eye in pagan religions. This god was also associated with the serpent, often described in its unfallen state as a winged snake. And pagan worshippers took to carrying the symbol of their god as an eye to appease him and show their allegiance. Semiramis then took over the pagan priesthood and the construction of Babylon. Semiramis, or Ishtar as she was known to the Assyrians, was revered as the woman who built the encompassing wall, or towers. This refers to the part that Semiramis played in the construction of the Tower of Babel. The Roman version of Semiramis, Diana, goddess of the hunt and the moon, is shown here as having a tower on her head, and she, like the other Roman goddess Venus, claimed to be the first woman or mother of all. Venus, it was claimed, ascended out of the sea on a scallop shell, and so the shell was also associated with the false religion, and was also a sexual symbol and a symbol for resurrection. Sometime after Nimrod's death, the licentious Semiramis fell pregnant, and to disguise the truth of her debauchery, she claimed that the resulting child, Tammuz, who's referred to in the book of Ezekiel, was a virgin birth, and that he was the promised saviour of the world. Because of this event, Semiramis was also able to claim for herself the titles Mother of God and Queen of Heaven. Tammuz was the first of many false messiahs in Satan's plan of deception and corruption of God's wonderful plan of redemption. Tammuz was killed as a young man in a hunting accident, and this is why the apostate women of Israel are described as weeping for Tammuz in Ezekiel chapter 8. His birth date was the 25th of December, and the 40 days of Lent in the modern Catholic Christian calendar mark his death and the time of mourning for him. His symbol was the T or Tau cross, also identifying him as a sun god, and Nimrod and Tammuz became associated as one god, like Osiris and Horus in Egypt, or the father and son of Christianity. The circle or disk, which not only represented the sun but also the astrological circle, also became a symbol of Satan's influence. A representation that was handed down through all the pagan religions. Including today's Hinduism. The most potent and powerful animals also came to symbolize the worship of Satan disguised in the pagan religions. For example, the eagle, the most powerful of the birds. The griffin. And the bull, an animal renowned for its potency. This symbol was also used in Egypt. When the children of Israel came out of Egyptian captivity, it was the Egyptian calf, the bull god, that they worshipped at the foot of Mount Sinai, whilst Moses was receiving the 10 Commandments from God. In Rome, there was the cult of the bull within Mithraism. Often, the symbols were combined, as seen here in this Babylonian cylinder seal, where the sun god possessed eagle's wings but was also in the shape of a cross. Or as seen in the Egyptian religion, where the sun disk and eagle's wings were combined. Or the bull, the snake, and the disk. In Rome, the worship of Mithra arose, combining the serpent and the lion, and Mithra held the keys of heaven and hell. In Egypt could be seen the crossed ankhs, or keys of life. When the Babylonians watched the sun set, it appeared to drop into the ocean, and so the sun god became Dagon, the fish god. The priest of Dagon worship wore the costume of the fish within their rites. Over the years, the costume reduced until it was just the hat or the fish head that represented the fish god. The Babylonian astrological system was transferred into other pagan religions. The symbols remained basically the same in the Egyptian zodiac and survived via pagan religions such as Mithraism into the modern fortune-telling form that we know today. The globe also represented not only this world, but also the astrological constellations surrounding it. As the leaders of the various empires were also often the high priests of the religions, the symbols of their power were the symbols of the religion. In Egypt, the snake, representing Satan, the supposed giver of earthly power to the apostate empires, was represented by the serpent staff that was carried both by the gods and by the priest kings. Although Christianity overcame paganism in all parts of the world, in time there was an infiltration of paganism into the church. Paganism, whilst appearing to be vanquished, became the conqueror. Her spirit controlled the church. Her doctrines, ceremonies, and superstitions were incorporated into the faith and worship of the professed followers of Christ, as the world, cloaked with a form of righteousness, walked into the church. In the pagan Roman religion, the cosmic god was referred to by the name Catholicus. Eventually, paganized Christianity became known as the Catholic, or universal religion. Within this religion, over time, all of the trappings of paganism became absorbed. In 1950, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was given the title Queen of Heaven. Semiramis and Tammuz became Mary and Jesus. The 40 days of weeping for Tammuz became the 40 days of Lent. Mary also became the Mother of God, with the tower over her head. But which God was she the mother of? Perhaps the answer is obvious when we see the son that she holds in her arms. The scallop shell of Venus became the scallop shell of Mary. The sun cross, the symbol of the crucifixion. Even the Ankh, the key of life, was soon introduced into Coptic Christianity. The sun cross on top of pagan towers, the cross on top of the church tower. All of the animals of paganism came into the church. The eagle, the griffin, the Dagon fish costume degenerated via the Egyptian sun snake religion into the fish hat worn by modern bishops and popes. The lion god of paganism. The Babylonian bull god became the papal bull. The sun disk of paganism and the halos of Christ and the saints. The 666 pyramids, the eyes of the all-seeing God and the sun god in the triangle became the all-seeing eye in the pyramid, the symbol of the Jehovah God. The lightning bolt, the symbol of the sun god, was adopted by the papacy. And also became a symbol of Mary. Adoration of the images of the gods became the veneration of the images of the saints, with even the rosaries and repetitious prayers coming from the rosaries and repetitious prayers of paganism. The keys held by Mithras and Jupiter were transferred to Peter. The high priest being carried on a throne by 12 men into the temple of the pagan god with fans in attendance, the Pope on the Sedia Gestoria carried into the Basilica of St. Peter by 12 men with fans in attendance. The triple crown of the Babylonian priest kings. The Pope wearing the triple crown of heaven, earth, and hell. The wafer god of paganism, the wafer god of Catholicism, offering daily sacrifices. Everywhere the mystical 666 was displayed. It can be seen here in the design of the windows. The same design can be seen in paganism, and in reverse on the floor of the most important Catholic cathedral in England, in Westminster. Here, the letters displayed on the monstrance each represent the number 6. The S, the snake symbol, and the F, the 6th letter of the Latin alphabet, which was also originally a snake symbol. The trident shin motif also had the mystical value of 666. Because the shin was constructed from 3 was, 3 sixes, or 3 nails. The 3 nails became Christian symbols associated with the sun. In paganism, the finger could also represent the lightning strike with a value of 6. And 3 raised fingers also represented the shin, symbol of the 666 god. This symbol was also transferred into Christianity, as seen on this statue of Jesus with the characteristic 666 hand. Because the bee constructed its hives using a 6-sided shape, it was also associated with the 666 god and given the value of 6. So, 3 bees represented 666. Papal crests often featured symbols with the value of 6, often in 3s, like the crest of Pope Urban VIII, shown here. The serpent staff of the pagans became the crozier of the priests, often with its heritage prominently displayed. 666 symbolism was incorporated into pagan temple architecture, with 3 rows of 6 columns each in the structure of this Egyptian temple. And that tradition continues in the Roman Catholic Church today. The modern Cathedral of St. Mary in San Francisco has a pattern of 3 rows of 6 crosses in the courtyard outside. Churches often have 6 steps leading up to the altar. And 6 candles on the altar. Flying serpents guarding pagan temples became the door handles of St. Mary's Cathedral in San Francisco. Similar symbols can be found on the door hinges of the Church of the Martyrs in South London. The winged serpent also became prominent in the Vatican, and on the top of St. Martin's Church in London. The snake became a common symbol. The pagan high priest, as the incarnation of the sun god, became the Pope as the vicarious Christ. Calling himself by the Babylonian title of bridge builder between God and man, Pontifex Maximus. Perhaps the most damning evidence is the choice of titles within the Roman Catholic Church. Using the system of transliteration, that is, giving a number value to certain letters, which was originally developed in Babylon, we see the values of these titles. Of particular importance is the fact that the Pope, as the Vicar of Christ, also has the number value of 666. 666, the number not just of a system, but also of a man, the Pope. Every Pope has this title, this number. As if to confirm its roots, the papacy embraced the astrological system as its own. For those who can read the signs, the Roman Catholic Church exposes itself as the beast of Revelation 13, a fallen church which has taken on the characteristics of a combined secular and religious power. It has become truly the modern Babylon whom God speaks about when he says, "Come out of her, my people." Although many people say that the book of Revelation is a closed book, it is possible for us to understand the symbolism that lies within it. God has left all things open for us, that we may understand and we may make our own decisions based on our understanding. It's our prayer that having watched this presentation, you also will be able to make your decisions. You also will understand what is the religion of 666 and what is the beast behind it. May God bless you as you consider these things.